Thank you for coming, Ho Tzu Nyen.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks for bringing this wonderful opening film that we have. Very intense, very short. Maybe to just start, maybe you can tell us a little about the whole idea, how you had the concept for that film. What was your first idea, how you approached the material?
Yeah, I think the way it started, maybe it's more accurate to say that it started with an image rather than a concept. So I was working on another project when one of my assistants managed to download this film, or rather this series of medical footage from the early 20th century. It's kind of like black and white silent film where it's basically a doctor or nurse in an asylum demonstrating to the camera a series of different medical illnesses that the patients were suffering from. So one of these was catalepsy, where the body of the patient basically becomes rigid and cannot be moved. So what the doctor or the nurse was doing was that he was pushing the head of the patient with his hand, and you can see that he was really using real force, and the patient was completely immobile. So that image got stuck in my head, and that in many ways is the origins of this film.
The initiation of this whole thing.
Yes.
Of course, I'm very interested in, since the film is called Gould, it's not maybe what the first thing that you have in mind when we think of Glenn Gould in a certain way, of course known as this wonderful pianist on one side. At the same time, we have always it comes in the immediate with the idea of thinking of Glenn Gould as a certain physicality, how he's playing, of course a certain brilliance, how he's playing, and also a certain obsessiveness in his work, and a certain rigidness, and how he works the material, not only the music, but also how he works the piano. Yeah. So was that as kind of how did you come from the catatonic image to the idea of working with Gould?
Yeah, I would say that rather than thinking of Gould as the starting point, it was actually the ending point. Okay. So I shot this footage actually in 2009, but I couldn't finish the film until I think late last year. So when I finished it, it was in a way because of Glenn Gould. So early last year, I started listening to a lot of Glenn Gould and was very fascinated by it. So my wife sent me some YouTube clips of him performing, and which were very intense to watch. I think you described it very well. The intense physicality, that of his playing. So I was really fascinated by the images of him playing the piano. While he is generating the music, it seems that the music is possessing him at the same time. I mean, he's very much a conduit or channel for the music, So he's playing the music, but the music is also playing him at the same time. So somehow, in a way that I might not be able to articulate very rationally, watching those images of Gould playing and listening to the music, it's sort of connected with these images. So I decided to try to place the images over his music, but I ended up distorting the music. So sorry to any Glenn Gould purists out there.
Another impulse that I was reading was very important to you was Caravaggio. That was also an image you were working on, or while you were working on this film. Maybe you can tell us a little about that background as well.
Sure. I think the image that you're talking about is David with the head of Goliath. So it's basically David holding the decapitated head of Goliath. I mean, that image was another image that kind of burned itself into my mind. What fascinates me with the image is that although David is the triumphant victor, he's alive and holding Goliath, who is supposed to be dead. But looking at the picture painted by Caravaggio, it always seemed to me that David looks a little bit lifeless, like a statue, whereas the head of Goliath looks animated and alive. So I started thinking about how, maybe if I reimagine the organization of the body, it is almost as though Goliath's head is the animating force, animating the body of David, who is just nothing more than a puppet. So that that holding of the head in the hands sort of came together with this medical image coming together with Gould.
It also reminds me of some of your older or other films, longer films, Here on Earth, where also the question of the head is kind of like a motive that and it seems to be a kind of continuous interest, like when you say also like the catatonic image of the head. Yeah. Can you speak about this?
Here is I shot a feature film in 2009 called Here, in which I reenacted the scene. I mean, this feature film was set in a mental asylum, so I basically reenacted that scene of the doctor kind of pushing the head of the patient. In the same year, I shot a medium-length film called Earth, which is kind of a post-apocalyptic tableau vivant. So in one of the sequences, we have a hand pushing a head in a destroyed car for about 7 minutes. So in the same year, I shot this footage as well. So it was just a kind of a recurring obsession, maybe, and that I had to kind of exorcise by shooting all these. But what we see in Gould is the last of these sequences I have shot. So hopefully I have worked this out, But in Gould, I guess what I tried to do was to sort of decontextualize this gesture, so that it is not surrounded or sandwiched by any narrative. And at the same time, this removal of the context is accompanied by the removal of the body. So we are left with just the basic elements of the hand, and the head. Yeah, so just leaving it to its
what results
minimal.
To me in a kind of different appearance of my own body as a viewer of the thing, which I found really interesting. Almost like that's why I also thought of the David and Goliath, that in a certain way when the body is missing there, all of a sudden there is a strange kind of interaction of my own body being in this stuck in the cinema, like being addressed from this forced movements of the head actively, this kind of like resonation. How you mentioned already the longer films, how was the shift from the longer narrative films to this really surrogate of a film, like this kind of intensity?
Yeah, this is actually the shortest film I've ever done. Yeah. So in a way, I felt that it was quite funny that our Q&A is longer than the film. But, yeah, well, I think that usually I prefer making longer films and films that are much slower. But I think I'm also kind of like interested in the other extreme, which is films that are fast and very short. So what I feel uncomfortable with is actually films that have the correct, pacing and rhythm. So it almost seems to me that when the rhythm and the pacing is just right, you actually forget time because you are absorbed in the flow of the narrative. So time is something you don't feel. But when the film is just slightly too slow, that's when time takes on a certain density or plasticity. So that's usually more like the films that I usually make. So this was kind of an attempt to do something in the opposite direction, just to kind of speed everything up.
It worked very well, I must say, for me at least.
Yeah.
Johnson Anderson Cheong is also a kind of connection point from the other films to this film. So that's being an actor that you have been working with for a few times. How was it like to work with him on longer films and now in the shorter one? Is it a kind of also something that has to do with the rhythm and finding the right rhythm? Is it a collaboration that you did on both films with him in a way?
Yeah, with Johnston, who's the protagonist of the film. Yeah, I worked with him since 2006. I was doing an audition and for another short film, and he just happened to be in the area, and I invited him in. So since then, he's appeared in almost most of my films. You know, yeah, it's you know, he's. In a way, he's a special, you know, guy. I mean, he's albino, so sometimes I imagine him to be like a blank, you know, sheet of paper, you know, like someone who is blank and white. I mean, so in a way, my initial fascination with him was his physiognomy. But after some time, kind of working with him, I think it became more that he was just a presence that I enjoyed very much, you know, just good energy from him, you know. So for him, you know, making these videos, like, you know, which are a little bit, you know, maybe unusual, at least in Singapore, for him, he treats all of these film shoots as adventures. So he's always asking me to, you know, let him try something more adventurous. Yeah. So, you know, in a way, that's the way I like to work, which is that every film shoot is just like a new adventure. Yeah. So I guess after all this time, we've become friends as well.
And so that means also in terms of the process, a lot of the cooperations then is a kind of improvisation that's not pre-scripted, where you have at certain points certain key moments where you want to head to, but like what happens in between is a kind of cooperation where he improvises or takes the lead as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't quite know how to answer actually about improvisation, you know. So in a way, the way that I go through my film shoots is quite precise, in the sense that everything is precisely storyboarded. But the way that I storyboard things is a series of instructions and directions. But during the film shoot, I have actually very few directions for the actors. So I just rely on the entire crew and the actors to interpret this very fixed set of directions. And, you know, I'm just curious to see what emerges from that. So it's something between being very planned and being kind of improvised. Yeah, and that goes on for like the set design or the lighting, you know, for, I guess, every aspect of the film.
Can you tell us already something about the new project? Like, it will not be shorter, I guess, as you said.
Well, the new project that I'm working on is actually a live performance, which will premiere, I guess, next year in May at the Vienna Festival. So it's more like a theatrical performance, and it's about tigers. Which is an animal that we had a lot of in Singapore before the British, before we were colonized by the British. So tigers are, you know, a very important animal for the indigenous Malay people. So tigers are like manifestations of the ancestor spirits. Shamans can transform into tigers, you know. But with the coming of the British, you know, the forest is destroyed. Tigers become extinct, and this entire cosmology and ecology is also destroyed. So in a way, this new project is about sort of the history of the Malayan region, but told through the story of the tigers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do we have questions from the audience? Is there someone who wants to ask something? If there are no more questions, we also can offer to continue our talk outside. We will both be there, and if you have further questions to either one of us, then feel free to speak with us outside at the bar. Otherwise, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you
again, and thanks for showing the film, and thank you all for coming tonight to the program, and enjoy the evening.
Thank you.